Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 170, and it's our next Ask the Coach episode. Have you ever wished people could truly understand what fibromyalgia feels like, or what it's like to live with a condition that never really goes away? You are not alone. This is one of the most common things I hear from clients and listeners. How do I help the people I love understand fibromyalgia? Because let's face it, fibro is an invisible illness. You can look perfectly fine on the outside while feeling like you've been run over by a truck on the inside. And trying to explain that to someone who has never experienced chronic pain feels impossible, which is why we're talking about it today. I'm sharing my favorite tools, resources, and ways to help others understand. We'll talk about how to know how much to share and who to share it with, because not everyone needs or deserves the full story. Plus, I'll show you how to create a simple fibro cheat sheet that makes it easier for others to support you when you need it most. Now, let's dive in to how you can explain fibromyalgia to the people who matter most in a way that brings more understanding, more compassion, and maybe even a little more help when you need it. So let's start with this. Why is it hard to explain fibromyalgia? You probably have run into this before where it feels really, really hard to explain. I mean, it's one thing to be walking around with a cast on your leg because you broke your leg, but with fibromyalgia and other invisible illnesses, we can look completely fine. In fact, aren't those the dreaded words? But you don't look sick. Plus, fibromyalgia is complex, and we have good days and we have bad days, right? There's days when we're in more pain, where we're more fatigued, where our brain fog is worse, we're more sensitive, we're more grumpy, right? And there are other days when we really are totally normal. When I was first diagnosed, I had only been married about 6 months, and my husband and I were on opposite sides of the country before we got married. We only lived together about a month before we got married. He was in Florida, I was in Oregon. We couldn't get much farther apart. So it was a real shock to him to be living with me prior to my diagnosis, especially when we didn't know what was going on, but then even after my diagnosis, because one day I would be completely fine. I would go to the store with him, walk around, do the shopping, do whatever. And then the next day I might be totally helpless and be like, "Oh, honey, can you get me a glass of water?" Because I can't hardly move, right? And I am sure for my new husband, that was mind-boggling. I am sure he had days where he was like, "What the heck is this? What did I marry?" Right? Because one day I'd be fine and the next day I totally wasn't. And that can be really, really hard for people to understand, especially because we look the same on the outside, right? There is nothing to tell them that today is a high pain day unless we tell them. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today are ways that we can explain that so that when these fluctuation happens, it makes more sense to them. Plus, we get emotionally exhausted from constantly having to explain. I have had a lot of clients who have said, "Oh, I just wish people would stop asking me how I feel," because the answer is always, "I feel bad. I feel terrible. I'm tired of saying that," right? So our goal here is to find some common language that we can use and some tools to help make that invisible illness a little bit more visible and to help people actually recognize things when they see it in us. All right, so first let's talk about some simple ways that we can explain fibromyalgia, and then we'll talk about how much to share and with which people in your life, right? Because not everybody gets the same answer. So first, when it comes to some simple ways to explain fibromyalgia, I think one of the first things we can do is use some relatable analogies, right? One of the things that I use often is it's like having the flu, right? I think we all, at some point or another, have had a really bad cold or have had the flu or COVID, right? And we are just exhausted getting up from our beds and walking to the couch. Like that is all we've done, and we are exhausted. Or you've had that all over body aching where everything is just uncomfortable and even your eyelashes hurt. I think everybody can relate to that. So imagine the last time that you were sick like that, only you just don't get better, right? That can be a way to explain how it feels. And I will tell you, after my fibromyalgia was very well controlled, but not 100% in remission yet, when I would wake up in the morning and feel that fibro pain come back, I'll be honest, my first thought is always, oh no, I'm getting sick. And then the other shoe drops. Oh, yes, this is my old friend, fibromyalgia. So, explaining it that it's like having the flu every day is pretty realistic. Okay. Another thing I use to explain fatigue that really works well with those of us in Gen X is remember those cell phone batteries we had, like those first cell phones or even, other batteries, rechargeable batteries, where you charge them all night long and it says it's fully charged, and then you turn it on and it lasts maybe 45 minutes. That's what our body's batteries are like, right? We may look like we're fully charged, but boy, we run out fast, right? And it might take all night or even longer for us to recharge those batteries. So that's another example I think people can understand. If you know of something in the person's life that you are talking with, right? If you know of something in their life that relates to your fibromyalgia, you can use it as an example. So, for instance, you might say, hey, remember when you hurt your back and you could barely move and everything kind of hurt? It's like that, except it might hurt your back one day and your legs the next day, and you never go away, right? Or I do remember a client's husband talking about the fact that he had hurt his wrist, and so he had his arm in a cast, and he could not really use that one hand, and how helpless he felt, and how much pain he was in, and feeling at moments like, oh my God, is this ever going to get better? And about how much that helped him understand his wife's fibromyalgia, right? It's not a direct relationship, but it's a taste, right? It's a taste of something that is very much like fibromyalgia. So think about that. And it really helps others feel what you experience, not just hearing about it, right? It helps them feel it in their own bodies, to remember those times when maybe they actually felt like that. Only whatever they were experiencing got better, and there's no cure for fibromyalgia, right? The second thing that I would recommend, so number one, as far as simple ways to explain fibromyalgia, number one was using those relatable analogies. Number two is tactile demonstrations. So, again, along this idea of helping them experience it, not just theoretically hear about it from a logical perspective, but actually experiencing it in their bodies. Here are some ways that you can help people do that. One is to use a clothespin. I have used this at networking events, business events, where I get to talk for, do a 10, 20-minute talk or whatever. I will give people a wooden clothespin. I guess it doesn't have to be wooden, but a clothespin, have them clamp it on their finger and leave it there for my entire talk. At a certain point, they all want it off, right? And that can be what that constant ache is like with fibromyalgia, only we don't get to just take fibromyalgia off like they can take the clothespin off. So I will often have them put that on at the beginning of my talk and then not mention it at all until the end of the talk. And then be like, hey, how does that feel? At what point were you struggling to understand what I was talking about because all you could focus on was the clothespin on your finger? Right. So that can be a really good way of demonstrating that to people. You can also use rough sandpaper. So really coarse sandpaper, and have them just put their hand on it and leave their hand on it or their arm on it throughout the talk, right? This is when I would use it again, along with the clothespin. I'd usually do a clothespin on one finger and the sandpaper under the other arm. And that can really demonstrate the sensitive skin, the allodynia, the heightened pain response that we have with fibromyalgia, and explain that this, you're feeling sandpaper, but that's what clothes feel like to us, right? So that can give them that experience. You might also talk about weighted objects or backpacks, or, one of the things I've used often because we have cats, we buy, 10-pound bags of kitty litter. Can you imagine how exhausted you'd be if you carried around, that bag all day, right? So it can kind of give that simulation of that fatigue because it costs us extra energy everywhere. And these things are great for hands-on learners, or especially kids, right? Who maybe haven't gone through breaking their arm or hurting their back or having the flu in the same sort of way. You can have them experience what that would feel like. All right. So that's number 2, the tactile demonstrations. And number 1, again, was the relatable analogies. Now, let me share with you a couple of tools that also can help explain fibromyalgia. One of my favorite ones is the spoon theory. You may have heard of this. It was written by Christine Miserandino, and you can just look it up online. You'll find it. We'll put a link in the show notes. But she wrote this story about explaining her illness, which I believe was lupus, but explaining her chronic illness to a friend. They were sitting in a cafe, I believe, and when her friend asked, what is it like living with your chronic illness? Christine went around and grabbed all the spoons that were available in the cafe, and she handed this handful of spoons to her friend and said, okay, here. This is how much energy you have for the day. These spoons represent your energy. And everything that you do is going to cost you energy. So we wake up in the morning and it takes energy just to freaking get out of bed, right? So that costs you a spoon. And so our friend, puts the spoon down. And then once we get out of bed, we've got to go to the bathroom, brush our teeth, get ready for the day. Maybe that costs you 1 spoon, 2 spoons if you're taking a shower, right? So her friend decides, are you taking a shower? Is it going to be 2 spoons? Are we just doing 1 spoon? So her friend puts the spoons down. And they go through the day like that, making breakfast, driving to work, making the decision. And when they get through to the end of the day, and forgive me if I'm not quite getting the story correct. I'm getting the gist of it, even if the specifics are incorrect. So make sure you check out her story. But at the end, I believe they end up with, okay, now I can either get ready for bed or I can eat dinner. And you have to choose. There's 1 spoon left. Both things cost a spoon. So which one are you going to choose? You're going to get ready for bed and go to bed, or are you going to eat dinner and then just pass out on the couch? Right? And it is so relatable for so many of us who do have chronic illnesses, because that's really what it's like. We get down to the end of the day and we're like, oh my gosh, do I make dinner and eat dinner, or do I just go to bed? right? And so giving them something tactile like those spoons and going through that story can really help them understand. Now, one of my favorite things to do with this story is to actually act it out with people. So, literally give them spoons and go through the spoon theory and have them put their spoons out. One networking event I did this with, I gave everybody a different number of spoons, right? Because some of us, we might wake up and have a lot of spoons that day. And some of us, we might wake up and have very little spoons. And so I had them all stand up with all their spoons. And then when they ran out of spoons, they had to sit down. And so some people sat down, ran out of spoons after they took their shower, but before they had gotten dressed, right? You've been there, I'm sure, at some point where it's like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I have to go right straight back to bed with the towel wrapped around me, right? Other people got all the way through the day. So it really, especially with a group of people, really helped people understand not everybody is the same. And that challenge of what am I spending my energy on? I personally like to use the analogy of money, right? This is exactly the same as the spoon theory, just with money, right? Most people understand the idea of budgeting your finances, right? You only make so much money at your job, right? And you only have so much money to spend throughout the month, and you have to choose what you're spending that money on. Sure, you could go out and buy that brand new motorcycle or whatever it is, but then are you also going to be able to put food on the table and a roof over your head, right? It's the same thing, except our health. So we have to think about how we're budgeting that. And yeah, we can use credit, we can borrow from tomorrow, but then that costs us more, right? Just like in real life, if you use a credit card, you have to pay interest. In our health life, in our fibro life, if we borrow from tomorrow's energy, that actually costs us more and it'll take longer for us to recover. So, using those two examples, the spoon theory or just budgeting money, same concept, just different tools. And so you might think about who you're talking to. If you're talking to a banker, I bet the money will make a lot of sense. And then just, talk that through with them, act it out with them. Again, this can be something that would be helpful for kids because it's very interactive, tactile play, right? The other thing you can do is you can just print out the spoon theory and just sort of leave it lying out on the coffee table. Maybe somebody will pick it up and take a look at it. So these things can be really great. Or just print it out and hand it to them and say, hey, if you want to understand me better, this is a short article that you can read. All right. So that's the first tool, the spoon theory. The second tool that I will mention are things like books, right? There are a lot of really great books out there that explain fibromyalgia, right? I've got a couple books, right? You can use my books, but remember what you're actually asking people. Reading a book is a big ask, right? Even if it's a short book or even if they read fast, right? Reading a whole book is a big ask. And so we really need to be aware of who we're asking to do that. And in our next section, we're going to talk about how much to share and with who. And we'll talk about how to know if giving somebody a book is the right move. Whenever anybody that finds out that I've written a book and they are talking about, oh, my friend really needs to read this, my first question is always, would they read it? Right? Because not everybody is going to. And we need to be honest about that and realistic about that. Another tool in a similar vein there is the fibromyalgia documentary Invisible. This is something that you potentially could rent. And, next time it's your turn to pick the movie, start watching Invisible, right? It is about 75 minutes. So it's an hour and 15 minutes. And it does a really good job of explaining what fibromyalgia is, but also showing the full spectrum of ways it affects people. So there are people in the film like me who have fibromyalgia in remission and who are able to live a normal life. And there are also people in the film who are very, very disabled and the whole spectrum. So it's a great tool in that sense. But again, It's a big ask. That is an hour and 15 minutes of somebody's life, and they may or may not be willing to do that. And that's okay. We need to allow that to be okay for them. All right. So, those kinds of tools for people who are ready and willing can be great tools to help you explain fibromyalgia to the people that you love. Now, my last category here, so let me just recap. We've got relatable analogies, we've got those tactile demonstrations, we've got tools like the spoon theory or relating it to budgeting finances, and then we've got tools like the invisible film or books like mine, Dr. Ginevra's other books, okay? The last category is what I call stealth explanations. Now, that would be things where you're explaining, but you're not just explaining. So, like I mentioned, leaving a copy of the spoon theory out on a coffee table. That is a stealth explanation. You're not asking anybody to read it. It just happens to be lying there, and somebody just might pick it up and read it as something interesting. You could do that with books. You could do that with other articles that you print out. You could listen to this podcast when other people might be able to overhear. You could watch the film when other people might be able to overhear. These are the kinds of things that we can do that aren't just directly sit down, let me explain this to you, but also where they can hear explanations. You can also use tools. Remember, I said at the beginning, we get really, really tired of trying to explain this. Some of these stealth explanations could even be for you. So I have had clients who just really struggled with how to explain every day how they felt without having to explain every day how they felt, right? So one of my clients, what she ended up doing was getting a bowl and some decorative rocks. And the level of those rocks in the bowl basically was an analogy for her energy level, for how good she felt that day. If the bowl was full, it was a good day. She had a lot of energy. Her husband could just look at that bowl and he would know how she felt. And she said it gave her such satisfaction when she was having a really bad day and felt terrible to just dump out that bowl on the counter and just have all the rocks there on the counter. Like her husband could just take one look at the counter and be like, oh, today is not a good day. So you can find creative ways like that to not have to actually explain every day. Is this a good day? Is this a bad day? Right. Another of my clients had developed a little like a temperature gauge that went on the fridge, and she would move that little needle. Is her tank full or is it empty? And just kind of to show her whole family, let's see, mom's about halfway today, right? Those kinds of things are what I call stealth explanations, because you're not actually speaking and they're not purposefully sitting down listening to you. They just are things that can sort of happen, right? So, how much should you share? This is a question I think we often forget to ask ourselves. Not everybody should get the same explanation, and not everybody deserves the same explanation. Back way back in episode 57, I had my friend Kimberly come talk. She is a counselor, and she talked about how we have sort of three circles of people in our lives. We have the inner circle, which are the people who are the closest to us, right? We have the middle circle, that might be friends, extended family, maybe the people that you work with if you're close to them. And then we have the outer circle, which are really just the acquaintances or the coworkers that you say hello to in the hall, but you don't really know a ton about them, right? And then even outside that outer circle, we've got people like the cashier at the grocery store that we don't know at all, right? So each of those circles, you're going to share a different amount of information. And let me just give you some examples. If somebody in the inner circle, like your best friend, maybe asks you, hey, how are you doing today? You'll tell them the real deal, right? You'll tell them, oh, today is such a high pain day and I'm so exhausted and I got all this stuff I have to do tomorrow and I don't know how I'm going to do it. Like you really share the real story with the people who are in your inner circle. That next circle out, the middle circle, right? Other friends, extended family, that coworker that you know outside of work and your friends, but not best friends. They ask you, hey, how are you doing today? You might say, oh, today's not a good day, but kind of leave it at that, right? You don't tell them the whole story. You don't lie to them. You just tell them a little bit, right? You share selectively with those people. Then we've got our outer circle, right? That coworker that you say hello to in the hall, but you don't really know anything about them. They say, hey, how are you doing today? And you just kind of say, fine, and you move on, right? They're not really asking, how are you doing today? They are just basically saying hello. And those people like the cashier at the grocery store who says, hey, hi, how are you doing today? Same thing. They're just basically saying hello. And the appropriate answer is great, fine, no problem, moving on, right? Now, I really want to stress here that people earn their place in whichever circle through their behavior and how they respond to you and through being someone you can trust, right? Or not. They are not automatically associated to a circle because of who they are to you, right? Your spouse doesn't automatically go in the inner circle. Your best friend doesn't automatically go in the inner circle. Your parents aren't necessarily in that inner circle, right? We think about how much you're willing to share, right? So think about those circles and think about them in terms of how much you share, and then test and see who belongs where. So maybe you have a coworker at work and they say, hey, how are you doing? And normally you just say fine. Only this time you're like, oh yeah, it's kind of a bad day. How they respond to that will tell you how much more you should share, right? If they're like, oh no, I'm so sorry to hear that. What's going on? Maybe they start moving towards that middle circle, right? And then maybe you say, oh, well, I have fibromyalgia and today just happens to be a harder day. Well, maybe that coworker that you don't know very well, that you thought was on the outside circle there, says, oh my gosh, yes, I have fibromyalgia too. It's so hard. Maybe they find themselves all of a sudden in your inner circle as somebody that you trust and that you can really share with. Now, let's look at an opposite example. Maybe you think that your best friend or your spouse is on the inner circle and they say, hey, how are you doing today? And you say, oh my God, it's such a hard day. And you give them the whole thing and they're like, oh, and then they move on. Maybe they don't belong in your inner circle. Maybe they move to your middle circle, or maybe even all the way to your outer circle when it comes to your fibromyalgia. Now, that's the other trick to this. You might have people that are completely in your inner circle when it comes to your fibromyalgia, like that coworker who also has fibro. But maybe there is nothing else about your life that they really even know about. Right? You are not going to put them on the inner circle when it comes to your relationship with your husband or your kids, right? Like, oh, my teenager is being a brat today. We're not going to share that maybe with them. But for our fibromyalgia, they're in the inner circle, right? And vice versa, right? Obviously, your best friend is your best friend for a reason. They're in your inner circle for something, but maybe not your fibromyalgia. Maybe there's something that has absolutely nothing to do with you. Maybe they had someone in their family years ago who said they had fibromyalgia, and it was really just an excuse to get out of doing stuff. So maybe they have this whole story in their head of what fibromyalgia is supposed to mean. And so maybe you just don't share that part of your life with them, but for everything else, they're your best friend. So we put people in these circles based on what they earn by how they respond to us. So really think about that and don't just automatically try to have somebody who should be in your outer circle, try to keep putting them in your inner circle. That is where arguments, misunderstandings, all sorts of negative things come from. So be aware of that. So if you want to learn more about this concept and to hear more from Kimberly, you can go check out episode 57. We will have that in today's show notes. Today's show notes are fibromyalgiapodcast.com/170. All right. The other thing I want to say about how much to share and where to share it is to remember to have boundaries, right? Everybody doesn't get everything, even if they want to, right? I've been using the example of coworkers. It may not be appropriate to share anything about your health at work. If you work in a very competitive environment, maybe you want to keep all of your health information completely private, nobody knows, right? So in that case, if somebody's like, "Hey, how you doing today?" "Oh, it's okay. I'm fine." It's okay to do that. You're not lying. Just understand that the question that they're actually asking you, or what they're really saying to you, is just simply, "Hi." "Hello, how are you?" is really just hello. They don't actually want to know how you are. So it's okay to say, "Great," and move on. If you have somebody that maybe knows about your illness, but you're just in a place where you just don't want to talk about it, it's okay to say things like, "Yeah, thanks for checking in. I'm just resting today." Or, I just don't want to talk about my symptoms right now, but tell me how you've been." Right? It is okay to have those boundaries. You do not owe anybody anything. This is your personal life, your body, your illness, your story. You get to set the rules. Now, it can be really important to share some of these things to help people understand, but on your terms when you want to. So again, remember to set those healthy boundaries. And one of the boundaries, one of the things I want you to practice is just simply saying no. And one of my friends who does not even have fibromyalgia, she posted a letter from E.B. White, the author of Charlotte's Web, posted a letter from him. And at one point he says in there that he can't do something for secret reasons. And so she made this post about this and how she told her husband he was asking her to do something. And she's like, "I just can't for secret reasons." And I just love that so much. But you can also just say, "I'm sorry, I just simply can't." Again, you don't owe anybody any explanation. No is a complete sentence. Nope, I simply can't. You can even say, "I simply can't right now," or whatever. You don't have to explain anything. So practice that. Practice that. All right. Now, as we're talking about what to share and who to share it with, kids come up in that, right? Because so far we've been talking largely about explaining to adults, but kids sometimes need a little bit of a different explanation. Depending on their age, they may understand fully or they may not understand at all. So we do need to have a little bit of a different strategy when it comes to explaining to kids. Now, there are some fantastic books out there that can help explain chronic pain and chronic illness to children. My best friend happened to write one of them. It's called Raven's Doll: How to Explain Fibromyalgia to Your Child. And it is a book where the child, Raven, goes through and explains about her mom's fibromyalgia, specifically fibromyalgia. You can hear my interview with Melissa in episode 98 of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. So go to today's show notes and we'll have a link to that where you can learn more about that. Melissa has also made a coloring book. So if you have kids, maybe you're reading it and coloring it, helps them be a little bit more interactive. You can do that. But it's also, she also has lesson plans. If you reach out to her, she's got lesson plans where you can actually do the activity that is in the book, Raven's Doll, actually do that with other people. Raven's Doll is a paper doll. A nurse comes to the school and has everybody take home a paper doll and decorate it for someone that they know who is sick. So one person has, the bald head and the pink shirt, and it's for grandma who's going through breast cancer treatment. And another one comes with a cast on one leg and crutches, and that's for big brother who broke his leg. And Raven's doll looks perfectly normal. And so she explains about fibromyalgia. But you can actually do that activity with your kids. So that's the first book, Raven's Doll, How to Explain Fibromyalgia to Your Child. And that is in episode 98. The second book is called Soft Hugs for Mommy. And I interviewed the author of this in episode 149. There's a lot more information about Soft Hugs for Mommy in there, how that came about. And another great book, I have not interviewed the author of this one, but another great book that I really like for this purpose is Why Does Mommy Hurt? And that's a little bit more generic chronic pain than it is fibromyalgia specific, but it definitely still helps. Now, the cool thing about these books is that it gives you a vehicle to be able to not just explain, but also have the conversation, right? So as things happen in the story, you can have the conversation about it. Oh, yeah, mommy's like that, and explain and talk about it. How do you feel when that happens? And always remember with kids, really to keep your tone loving and reassuring, right? My body works differently, but I still love spending time with you, right? Or we can't go to the park and play today because mommy doesn't feel good. So let's stay at home and cuddle and read books. Right. And eventually your kids will understand. One of my favorite stories, one of my graduates, Terry, she tells these Casey stories, which I love. Casey, reading Raven's Doll from a very young age, has done some really cute things to tell her grandma Terry that she is taking care of her. So at one point she hands her a chicken nugget. It was like, here, this will help your fibromyalgia. Or, Grandma, you need to sit down for your fibromyalgia. And I just love that. The other thing that I think is really cool about these kids' books is they work for adults and teens too. So, for example, you could give a copy of these books to your parents to read to your kids when the kids come over, right? They're reading it to the kids, but they're hearing it too. Right? You could ask your husband to read a book to your kid. You could just leave it sitting out on the coffee table. These are cute books. People are for sure going to pick them up and just flip through, right? I also recommend using these books anywhere you have kids where you are interacting. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you go to a church, donate some books to the children's program at church, right? So those kids understand people who are a little different from them, whether they understand you specifically or not. These are good lessons for kids to learn. You could donate them to your doctor's office, even if it's not a pediatrician's office, although you definitely should donate them there because kids are in the waiting room. But kids are in the waiting room, lots of places, at the dentist, at the doctor's office, lots and lots of places, at your chiropractors, wherever you go, wherever you're sitting around, waiting around with kids, give them a cute book to read that teaches them a little something about chronic pain, chronic illness, and fibromyalgia. It's great things to do. And remember, the emotional perspective on this is challenging, right? We are talking about our bodies, our illness, the way we can live our lives. And so it feels very personal because it is. It is personal, right? And so a lot of parents feel sad or guilty. And that is valid. Maybe you can't be the parent that you had hoped that you would be able to be or that you want to be. But there is a hidden gift in that too. And there's so much these days about toxic positivity, and that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about truly there is a hidden gift. When kids grow up with parents who are a little bit different, or siblings who are a little bit different, aunts, uncles, grandparents, around people in general who are a little bit different, they learn empathy. They can learn compassion and how to understand and relate to people who are different from them, right? They can grow up to be more inclusive, more emotionally aware, and not as maybe afraid of people who are different than them. Depending on how you live with your fibromyalgia, they may also learn resilience from you, right? If you are able to keep a positive attitude and look on the bright side, no matter what challenges come your way, just because today is a high pain fibro day doesn't mean I have to turn into a meanie, right? Then they can learn from watching you. Just because life throws something hard in my way doesn't mean I have to be mean to people. I can still be nice to people even when I'm in pain, even when I'm having a hard day. And those lessons are things they may not learn in the same way if you were a perfectly healthy parent, right? Obviously, I'm not saying we want all parents to struggle with chronic illness. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there is a gift in that you can take advantage of. And I hate to say it, folks, but if you have fibromyalgia, your children have an 8 times higher chance of developing fibromyalgia because you have fibromyalgia. There's an 8 times risk. So you may just be teaching them how to manage their own fibromyalgia someday. Or even better yet, if you really learn how to manage your fibromyalgia, what you learn that they then learn from you might keep them from developing fibromyalgia someday. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that you have fibromyalgia and your kids are watching you. We can turn this into an awesome opportunity to teach them compassion, resilience, empathy, and good self-care for when they're adults. All right. Number 6 on my list here is choose the right time and place. So a lot of times we forget that timing matters, right? Maybe when you were a kid, I think about this, with like the older generations, like, let me ask your dad when he's home from work and sitting in the chair with a cold beer. But there's some truth to that, right? Like my husband, when he comes home from work, he needs to decompress from all the stressors that happened at work before I can, present him with something new to think about, right? So, if a water pipe burst during the day, I'll give him a minute before I tell him about it when he gets home, just so that he can decompress and be prepared to deal then with the next thing. So what this means is it needs to be the right time for you and for them, and it needs to be in the right setting. So that means don't have these conversations when you're in the middle of a flare. I mean, sometimes you have to, right? But ideally, you are going to have these conversations when you're feeling good or decent, at least, a less bad day. so that you are thinking more clearly. Your emotions are maybe a little bit more stable. You can explain better, right? Trying to explain this when you're in the middle of a flare and the brain fog is so high and your pain is so high is a really, really hard thing to do. So set aside time when you feel okay to have this conversation and when they're in a receptive place as well, right? Then I want you to frame this as teamwork, right? This isn't about me telling you everything that's wrong with me and how you're not helping me properly. This is about explaining what's happening to me so that you can understand me better and we can work together to help manage my fibro better, right? So things like, here's what helps me on tough days. You know, when I'm in having a really high pain day, the lights are too bright, the sounds are too noisy, all of that. So if you notice me squinting, or if I'm complaining about the volume on the TV being too high, it's probably because I'm in a lot of pain, right? And so maybe there's a way you could wear headphones or something like that, right? And here's what makes things worse, right? Explaining again, high pain day, right? Those playing a video game on loud volume is not going to help me feel any better. In fact, it's going to help me feel worse. So here's what we need to do. The other thing that I want you to do is give the people around you the chance to be creative themselves. What I mean by that is asking them, do you see other ways that you could help? Right? If you've got somebody who's literally volunteering to help. Now, I realize not everybody's family is this supportive, right? You might have family members that are not in your inner circle. So bear that in mind. But if you do have people, whether this is at home or at work or just friends, if you have people who are asking, how can I help when you are in a bad way? Ask them if they see other ways that they could help. A friend of mine did this with her boyfriend. They sat down, they went through the calendar for the week to see so she could be prepared and talked through how he could help her. He really wanted to help, but she had no idea. Like, these are the things I have to do. What do you think you could help with? And so, one of the things he did was he made sure that all her stuff was ready the night before so that in the morning she could just grab it and go. Right? He made the coffee, he packed the lunch, like he just did all those things to make it easier for you. Now, that might not be the right thing for your people to do. There might be something else. My husband is a Mr. Fix-It. He's an engineer, right? So he's going to engineer things, and that sometimes is helpful and sometimes not. But yeah, just let them be who they really are and let them think of other ways that they can help. Be willing to accept the help. I think this is a biggie too, like especially for our perfectionists. If you are a perfectionist, if that is your fibromyalgia wellness style, you may need to work on letting people help you in imperfect ways. It will not be as good as you would do it yourself. The dishwasher might be loaded in a different way than you would do it. It's still going to get clean. And if it's not, you can run it again, right? So let people help you and let that be a gift to them, but also practice letting them help you imperfectly. Now, I do want to relate this story. I think I shared it on another episode recently, but when I was a kid, we had a house fire and we had a lot of people coming to help us out. They even threw a party for us to donate all kinds of things at this party for us. And my mom was having a hard time with it. And I will never forget our priest at the time saying to her, sometimes the best gift you can give someone is to allow them to give to you. So, all you givers out there, if you love helping other people and find it difficult to let them help you, think about how selfish that is. You are taking away from them the opportunity that you love the most, which is helping other people. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here, in terms of tools, right, and things that we can do, is our flare survival plan. I take you through this in episode 78. Again, there'll be a link in today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/170 for today's episode. But episode 78, I actually walk you through how to create a flare survival plan, right? And this worksheet, this exercise was developed because I had a client who had fibromyalgia and she was going to be getting her tonsils out. As she was preparing for this, she realized that, first of all, having her tonsils out was probably going to trigger a fibro flare, right? The pain of having your tonsils removed is going to cause more fibro pain. And she wasn't going to be able to communicate very well. She wasn't going to be able to explain to her fiance what kind of help she needed. So we put together this document that showed, if I'm experiencing fibro pain, I need these meds or these therapies. If I'm experiencing pain from my tonsillectomy, I need these things, maybe a popsicle, right? And she also, like, if I have a headache, then it's this other section of things, right? And so really just outlined for him exactly like this symptom, this is what I need to help with that. And as she put it together, both of us were just like, oh my gosh, everybody needs one of these. So this is a work in progress, right? You are not going to know everything right up front, but start with what you do know, right? When you experience your fibro and break out your fibro symptoms. So fibro pain, separate from fibro fatigue, separate from brain fog, right? I always know that I've been working too long, too hard, using my brain too much when I start typing and I spell things phonetically. So phonetically, I would spell with an F instead of a PH. That tells me, my brain needs a break. That is an early warning sign. What are your early warning signs for your fibro pain? For me, it can be starting to get a little bit of a headache or noticing that my shoulders are tight, right? There might be things that you can start noticing earlier and earlier. I'll never forget, I was on a date with a guy years and years ago. We had only, I think it might have even been our first date. We were walking through a museum and he says to me, "Do you need to eat something?" And I'm like, yeah, but how did you know? And he's like, "I could tell by the way that you were walking." And I thought, wow, like, I don't even know, am I walking any different? But apparently, he had family members that dealt with low blood sugar, and something about the way I was walking reminded him of them. And so he's like, "Hey, do you need to eat something?" And so as we start identifying these early warning signs, it'll help our family, our friends help us better. And you might even learn something about yourself. The other thing I want you to remember is this is not one size fits all. So, for example, my migraines are a lot more under control now. But when I was starting to get them under control, one of the things I discovered was if my headache was only like a 1 or a 2, I could maybe just take Advil. If it was a 3, 4, 5, maybe a 6, then I could take Toradol, one of my prescription meds. If it was 6, 7, 8, 9, like, don't even bother with the Toradol, don't even bother with the Advil, go straight to the Furoset. It's stronger medication. And so different things work for different times. You may find that if you're at a low level, you can just take some Tylenol. If you're at a higher level, maybe you need to take a Tramadol. If you're even a higher level, maybe you need to break out the Vicodin or hop in an Epsom salt bath or whatever it is for you. Keep in mind that different levels of pain, different levels of fatigue, they're all going to maybe require a different response. Maybe at one point you need to close the blinds and go in a dark room. But at another point, you can just pop the Advil, right? So think through all of that. Once you get this outlined, you can then post it on the fridge or even share it digitally. In these days, we do so much digitally, but share it with others so that they can help you without even asking. So having your flare survival plan is fantastic for letting other people help you. It's also great for you to help yourself, because when we get in those situations where our pain, our fatigue, our brain fog is super, super bad, we literally don't know how to help ourselves. And to have it written down, you can go look at it. Yes, that's what I need to do. Okay. So share that with others, the people that you feel comfortable sharing that with, and that can let them help you. Another thing I want to mention real quick with all of this is that we sometimes try to put the burden of all of this onto one person, like maybe a spouse or a best friend, right? No one person can do it all for you. Even if you are a caretaker for somebody else, like you know this, you can't be everything for that person. So build yourself a team. Maybe you have some people who are your emotional support that you can go to when you're really struggling emotionally. Maybe there's other friends that can't handle that, but they are up for that social connection to just help you keep from feeling like you're alone, right? You may need professionals as part of your team, right? You might need therapists, doctors, spiritual advisors, a coach. Those professionals are also part of your team. The cool thing about professionals, speaking as one, that's our job. So they're like, yes, I can't be 100% all of your support, but bring it on. Like, that's what I'm here for, right? So, and I am always on your side. It doesn't matter what I think. All that matters is what you want, right? I am 100% here to support you. Your therapist, your doctors, those should all be the same way. They are there to support you. And so it doesn't matter how they feel about the thing, right? Like, for instance, maybe you've decided that, you know, I think my symptoms would be better if I gave up some sugar and probably that drink at night after work, right? So I'm going to give up sugar and alcohol. Your best friend that you have wine nights with, right? Chocolate and wine, may not want you to give those things up, right? So having some professionals on your team where their entire job is just there to support you can be really, really helpful. It shares the responsibilities. When you have a team, it shares the responsibilities, strengthens relationships, and really just keeps one person from burning out, right? So I mentioned coaches, right? I do want to talk a little bit about how a coach can help, because a lot of people have never worked with a coach. And so you might not really realize how we can help you in this way. So obviously, all the information I've given you, right? Your coach could help you with all of that too. But in addition to that, some of the things that my clients have found really helpful are things like role playing difficult conversations, right? So talking through, how do I bring this up? When do I bring this up? How do I talk about it? What do I say? Which of these tools is going to be best in this situation? We can also help you walk through and create that flare survival plan. I did that work with my client. I helped bring things up and say, hey, what about this? What about that? What about when your pain gets higher? What about if your pain isn't so bad yet? And actually help you clarify that and strengthen that plan so that it is as helpful as possible, right? We can help you by giving you a place to practice explaining your fibromyalgia clearly and confidently. We can give you a place to practice saying no. I can't for secret reasons. So we give you a place to practice all of that, right? And we can help connect you to tools and resources that may be helpful. We can recommend maybe a specific podcast episode to have somebody listen to, or a specific part or a chapter of a book to read, right? The point is, when you are working with a coach, you've got somebody beside you so that you don't have to figure this out alone. And in addition, we all have fibromyalgia. So we have had to go through this ourselves. We've had to have those difficult conversations. We've had to figure out who's in our inner circle and who actually isn't. We've had to figure out how to get somebody out of our inner circle that maybe shouldn't be there, right? So you've got somebody who knows, who understands, and can guide you with that. Of course, if you want help with this, you can definitely do that through our Find a Coach page. Just go to findafibrocoach.com and you'll be able to put in all your information, what kind of help you need, and then schedule with a coach, a student coach, or occasionally, sometimes I even have openings and you can schedule with me. Okay. Those links will be in today's show notes, along with everything else, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/170. So let's just recap some of these main points for you, right? Number one, use simple, relatable explanations. And the relatable part might mean you use different explanations with different people, right? Number two is to be smart. Share your information wisely based on who you trust and in what context. So think about, which circle are they in? And is this the time to share more or less? Okay. Number three, do not expect one person to carry it all. They just can't. And number four, build that support team and your FLAIR plan. And don't be afraid to use professionals as part of that support team, because that professional is 100% on your side, right? They don't have their own bias built in. Okay. So here's your action step. Here is what I want you to take away from today's episode. Number one, I want you to sit down and think about those three circles. Think about how much information you're going to share in each of the three circles, and then maybe even take a piece of paper and diagram out who goes where. I want you to think, because this is the Fibromyalgia Podcast, I want you to think about this in terms of your fibromyalgia. But bonus points if you've got other things going on in your life that you want to think about where people go in these three circles based on other things happening in your life. Okay. The second action step is to start working on your FLAIR survival plan. Now, there is episode 57 and episode 78 with information on both of these two things. And just get started, right? There's worksheets that you can download. We'll link to those in today's show notes as well, where you can go out and just grab the download for the FLAIR survival plan so that you've got a worksheet you can work with. Start with that, and that will really, really help you clarify, which when you're clear, it's easier to be clear with others, right? So the clearer and the more confident you are, like if I just can say this more clearly myself, the clearer and more confident you are, the more understanding and support you'll receive, because the clearer you are, the clearer it will be to them. Okay. So as I wrap up, I've got this week's listener shout out for you. And this one comes from Charlene in Canada, who is mentioning another tool that I totally left off the list. She says, "Thank you for suggesting your YouTube channel. I love both podcasts and videos. So your YouTube channel has all the information I've been looking for and wondering about. I live in a rural area and the closest town is about 15 to 20 minutes. There are no support groups locally, only online. I am so thankful and grateful I came across your website. I honestly don't know how I did, but I'm so glad I did." Thank you so much for that, Charlene. I'm so glad that that's been helpful. And thank you for reminding me in your little note here to share the YouTube channel. So if you have got people who aren't podcast people and they're not book people, they're video people, then share our YouTube channel or other videos and things out there on fibromyalgia. Our YouTube channel is Fibromyalgia Wellness. We'll link to that in today's show notes. So you can go check it out. But a lot of our podcast episodes, I'm trying to do all of them, but some of the past ones there aren't videos for. But going forward, we're hoping to have all of our podcast episodes available on YouTube as videos as well. In addition, there is a playlist on my channel called Tami's Collaborations. Those episodes are places where not on my podcast, on somebody else's, right? So when I was on Dr. Ginevra's The Fibro Show, or did the webinar with Swing Care, or other podcasts that I've been on, those collaborations are a great way to learn more about me and more basic information on fibromyalgia. So like this episode, being that it's a whole podcast and we're on episode 170, we're going deep into the details of fibromyalgia. But some of those Tami's Collaborations episodes, I'm sharing fibro information on a podcast that's not about fibromyalgia. So it's a lot more basic. And some of those can be really, really great to share with people as ways of explaining. All right. As we wrap up, one last thing I want to let you know about this. As I'm recording this episode, we are in the middle of our Living Well with Fibromyalgia Summit, the holiday edition. And so we are in the middle of 2 weeks all about how to get through the holidays with less pain and more joy. And during the holidays, we have those moments where maybe you're seeing family members that you only see once a year, and you hear those comments like, "You're still not better yet?" Or you see it on their faces and they don't even say it out loud. So I hope the tips that we have shared here today are going to maybe give you some new ideas going into the holidays. I would encourage you to think about it ahead of time. So don't just get blindsided, during Christmas with all the family things or whatever. Think about it now. It's October, but the holidays will be here before you know it. And in fact, as I record this, yesterday was Canadian Thanksgiving. So we're already in some senses into the holidays. So take some time, think through these things, think about who is in which circle in your life, what you want to share with which group, and start working on your flare survival plan, because there is a good chance you're going to need it during the holidays. And if you're hearing this in time and you want to join our summit, it is 100% free. Just go to fibrowellnesssummit.com. Link in the show notes, but you can register for free. And we have got 2 weeks worth of talks that are 100% focused around how you can navigate the holidays with less pain and more joy. See you back here next time.